I've never seen her on the screen. I've never seen her in reality. She's just a figure.
Most celebrities have been in the limelight for one thing or another, but very few have made it to the news like Jayne Mansfield. She was a total tabloid sensation throughout her life and career, and her legacy lives on long after her. At the peak of her career, she was popular for turning heads and influencing various bold trends in the industry. This earned her a large following but still complicated her life a lot. Join us as we give you all the juicy details. Jayne Mansfield was born Vera Jane Palmer on April 19, 1933, in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. She seemed destined for a life of contradiction right from the beginning, a mix of vulnerability and drive that would ultimately define her public image. Her father, Herbert William Palmer, was a highly respected lawyer and musician, and her mother, Vera Jeffrey Palmer, came from a less wealthy background. Jayne was their only child, and she was particularly close to her father. He supported her early interests in music and learning. But tragedy struck early in life. When Jayne was just 3 years old, her father suddenly passed away from a heart attack while the family was on a road trip. The loss engulfed her and created an enduring emotional wound that she would carry all her life. In a real sense, the early trauma placed within her an insatiable hunger for attention, love, and approval that would drive her future mania for fame. After the death of her father, Jayne's mother remarried a man named Harry Piers, and the family moved to Dallas, Texas. In spite of life assuming a new routine, Jayne's relationship with her stepfather was never nearly as close and loving as she had shared with her biological father. In high school, Jayne was already showing the bravado and charm that would come to win audiences over later on. She loved acting and music and played violin and piano with a proficiency many who knew her envied. She also began experimenting with her appearance, fascinated by Hollywood actresses like Shirley Temple and Jean Harlow. They were her role models not just because of their good looks, but also because they ruled the screen and public space. By the age of 17 in 1950, Jayne wed her classmate Paul Mansfield. The two had a daughter, Jane Marie, the next year. While the marriage provided her with a temporary sense of security, it also clipped her wings. Jayne wanted more out of life than domesticity. She had an appetite for the limelight. She pursued drama courses at Southern Methodist University and later at the University of Texas at Austin, showing a clear focus on improving her art. Her husband did not want fame, and the marriage began to unravel as Jayne grew more restless and determined. She knew she wanted to act, and she felt she had to be in Hollywood to do it. In 1954, she and her family moved to Los Angeles so that she could finally see her dream come true. Jayne began the slow and often soul-destroying climb that awaits so many would-be actors. She played small roles in stage plays and worked odd jobs, waitressing and modeling, just to stay afloat. Meanwhile, she hustled hard, even then understanding that Hollywood wasn't just about talent. She dyed her hair platinum blonde and played up her looks, consciously imitating Marilyn Monroe, the reigning sex symbol. But Jayne had her own twist. She played up the image to an extent where it became one with her, and this made her stand out even more. Her breakthrough came in 1955 when she played a small role in Female Jungle, a low-budget crime film. Though the movie was not a blockbuster, her performance caught the attention of talent scouts, and soon she was signed by Warner Brothers, then 20th Century Fox. She also made headlines during this time for her brazen public stunts. One time, she accidentally dropped her dress and attended parties, wearing outfits that left little to one's imagination. The media loved her, and Jayne played her part to the latter. Her most celebrated stunt was in 1955, when she arrived at a Beverly Hills party hosted by Paramount Pictures for Sophia Loren. Jayne, almost bursting out of a dress, stood strategically beside Loren, who was snapped frowning disapprovingly at Mansfield's brazen décolletage. The pictures went viral and at once made Jayne a household name. Some were writing her off as a gimmick, but Jayne Mansfield was not such a terrible actress. She received a Golden Globe in 1956 as Most Promising Newcomer for her role in The Girl Can't Help It, which showcased both the sense of humor and the movie presence that lay hidden in wait beneath the looks. She capped this with other memorable performances in films like Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter and The Wayward Bus. Cynics who went out of their way to look beyond the surface would remark about her intelligence and acting talent, but most saw her as a sex symbol, never really valuing the range she could have brought. Her success was not limited to movies. She became a Las Vegas nightclub performer, earning top fees for her act, and was among the first American women to appear naked in a mainstream European film, Promises, Promises, in 1963. She also became a type of businesswoman, extending the value of her name beyond Hollywood. She was also interested in photo shoots and endorsements, and even created some of her own publicity campaigns. She was particularly rumored to have possessed a high IQ, pegged at 163, and was fluent in languages such as Spanish and German. But even though she was so successful, Jayne Mansfield struggled with being perceived seriously. The same image she had established so well also restrained her. As Hollywood entered the 1960s and the times changed, her brand of over-the-top glamour seemed to be out of style. Younger, more natural actresses dominated the limelight, and roles for Jayne dwindled and became less significant. Mansfield entered a field famously difficult, particularly for women who were not the sort of women you'd expect to be serious actresses, and she made herself indelible. In one way or another, whether you knew her as a joke, as provocative, or as a pioneer, Jayne Mansfield left a mark on Hollywood that continues to this day. Jayne Mansfield, firmly rooted in the limelight, stayed true to her character as a provocative and unapologetic woman, particularly when it came to nudity. While Hollywood was still holding on to conservative sensibilities, Mansfield shook the facade of restraint, repeatedly pushing the limits of what was considered respectable. She was not merely pleased to be the blonde sensation, but employed sexuality as a deliberate tactic, aware of the attention it generated. By the early 1960s, Jayne found herself appearing in mature publications and radiating an attitude that almost dared society's standards. She was notoriously among the first American actresses to pose nude for Playboy, a move that raised eyebrows and made headlines. But to Mansfield, it wasn't simply a bold act. It was a calculated move in keeping up to date in an industry willing to discard its stars the moment their glow started to dim. She remained there, not just because she could, but because she understood that she needed to hold attention in any way possible. Her daring attitude came at a time when women's sexuality was tightly regulated and largely dictated by male gazes. Jayne flipped that script on its side, declaring herself beautiful and, far better, profiting from it. She glided in transparent dresses, showed up at parties braless, and repeatedly flashed bits of flesh unimaginable to her contemporaries. Her very presence was so controversial sometimes that newspapers wouldn't print her photo or cropped it delicately. The most outrageous of her ventures into nudity was with the 1963 film Promises, Promises, the first Hollywood movie to feature a star American actress completely nude. Banned in several cities and scandalizing religious and right-wing groups, it was, however, also filling cinemas, with people intrigued as to what all the fuss was about. The box office success of the film also proved that there was demand in the market for content that broke the rules, and Jayne was the face of this cultural revolution. The scandals surrounding her did not start and end with her body. She was always hitting the headlines for her personal life, experiments, and rumored affairs with A-list stars. Among the most well-publicized of them was Anton LaVey, the leader of the Church of Satan. The two were always seen together, and it became rumored that Jayne was a member of the church or had taken part in its ceremonies. Although this was largely rumor, Mansfield didn't bother to deny it. She actually seemed to enjoy the rumors, adding yet another level of mystery to her persona. She was blamed for being everything from a walking publicity gimmick to a woman who would do anything to get a headline. Mansfield's conduct was contrived much of the time, with her passing out on public appearances, attending parties in see-through gowns, and even crashing parties uninvited. But nobody caught on that the genius behind it all. She understood media cycles, timing, and spectacle better than anyone ever has. If Monroe was the fantasy, Mansfield was the tabloid headline. She didn't need studios to market her. She was her own force. This biting manipulation of fame and the press would go on to affect generations of celebrities who followed in her footsteps. Way back in the heyday of Jayne Mansfield, way before Madonna shocked the world with her provocative stage performances, or Paris Hilton made tabloid soap operas into a corporate brand, there was already a precedent. She showed that controversy, if well executed, was a career enhancer rather than a destroyer. She compelled the society to confront their own hypocrisy. Why was it acceptable for men to boast bravado, but women who expressed their sexuality were desperate or loose? Jayne also shifted the cultural narrative regarding female agency. She wasn't posing there for the photographer, she was calling the shot. She wasn't embarrassed about her body, nor did she apologize for being attractive. This brazen, unapologetic demeanor spoke to many women who were beginning to rebel against the roles that had been assigned to them in society. Jayne Mansfield was the embodiment of the rebellion. She was, in so many ways, an anticipation of the sexual revolution that was just on the horizon. Her restrained rebellion in her choices provided a precedent for greater acceptance of sexual exhibitionism in the media and the arts. She was condemning Hollywood's unequal treatment of women by becoming the very same thing they fetishize and holding them up as both performance and critique. Even as her own career declined and she became more and more detached from big studio movies to foreign films and nightclubs, Mansfield's legacy lived on. The same business that had once mocked her began emulating her template. The line between actor and icon ceased to exist, and the building of a personal brand was just as important as the roles one acted out. Jayne Mansfield, at that point, was a revolutionary who knew celebrity as performance, and she performed it better than anyone else. She knew how to get people talking, and more importantly, she knew how to get people noticing her every move. Her life may have been sullied by scandal and spectacle, but at its core was a genuine comprehension of power. In a world where she was supposed to be quiet and beautiful, Jayne Mansfield was instead loud, present, and left an impression. Jayne Mansfield's personal life was just as much front-page material as her career, and in a way, the two were indistinguishable. Her love life was a parade of passion, heartbreak, scandal, and spectacle, much like the character she developed in front of the lens. She married young, at just 17, to Paul Mansfield in 1950. The marriage brought her a daughter, Jane Marie, along with the surname that would become famous all over the world. But the marriage was turbulent from the beginning, with Mansfield's ambitions constantly at loggerheads with Paul's desires for a more typical family life. As Jane's dreams of fame began to take shape, the fissures deepened. By 1958, they were divorced. As Mansfield's career soared, her personal life got both more public and more complicated. She wed former Mr. Universe Mickey Hargitay in 1958, a Hungarian-born, muscle-bound bodybuilder who was as much a presence in her image as in her personal life. They were a power couple, co-starring in films and appearing with their children at events on a regular basis. They had 3 children together, including then-future actress Mariska Hargitay. They looked like the perfect family, but that, like so much of the rest of Mansfield's world, was more shiny than it was real. The marriage began to fall apart under the pressure of her constant pursuit of fame and Mickey's desire for stability. Mickey reportedly grew uncomfortable with Mansfield's appearances and publicity stunts, especially as they got worse during the 1960s. It all culminated in their divorce trial in 1964. Hargitay sought custody of the children and alleged that Jane's lifestyle made her an unfit mother. He pointed to her topless photos, her nude appearance in Promises, and the chaos of her private life as proof that she couldn't provide the children with a stable home. Although the courts ultimately awarded Jane custody, the battle depicted a painful picture of a woman torn between the dual roles of mother and celebrity status. Her personal life did not slow down after the divorce. She wed director Matt Cimber, who had directed her in stage productions in 1964. That marriage was also troubled, and the couple were apart by 1966 and divorced soon after. Cimber, like Hargitay, was reported to have struggled with Jane's increasingly strange public behavior, her hunger for attention, and her insistence on not softening the sensational image that had made her a star. Mansfield's star status had by this time burned out in Hollywood, and she was making a living mostly by performing in nightclubs and foreign films. But despite this downturn, her private life continued to make headlines. Most scandalous and intriguing of all her affairs was her purported romance with Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. Although Jane never publicly admitted to a love affair, the two were often seen together in photographs, and LaVey had no problem encouraging the rumors. He even claimed that Jane was ordained a priestess in his church. For Mansfield, whether it was a genuine spiritual interest or just another headline, the association played directly into her attention-seeking image. The dark symbolism of LaVey's church, coupled with her unapologetic sexuality, only contributed to her mystique and, to some, her downfall. Other than LaVey, she was rumored to have had romantic relationships with some of the most powerful men in the world, and among them, President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert. Like her contemporary Marilyn Monroe, Mansfield was one of the Hollywood actresses who caught the eye of the White House. Although there is no evidence of this, rumors of her affair with JFK have persisted over the decades, sustained by Jane's impressions to the press and her proximity to these men. These sorts of relationships continued to keep her in the public eye, even after her film career fizzled out. However, the most gruesome aspect of Jane Mansfield's biography is its terrible ending. Jane was driving in Louisiana on June 29, 1967, in a Buick Electra with her driver and then boyfriend Sam Brody and 3 of her children dozing in the back seat. Their car hit the rear of a tractor-trailer that had stopped behind a cloud of insecticide fog early that morning. The top of the Buick was cut off in the accident. Jane, Brody, and the driver were killed instantly. Her kids in the back seat miraculously survived with minor injuries. The crash shocked the entertainment world, not just because of the tragedy, but because of the gruesome nature of the accident. In the hours following the crash, tabloids ran rampant with rumors that Jane had been decapitated. Even though the coroner later clarified that her head was not completely severed, the trauma was enough to serve decades of lurid speculation. The violence, suddenness, and public nature of her death seemed a grotesque end to a life lived entirely in the public domain. Conspiracy theories were rife following her death. A few claimed the accident was no accident but a curse, perhaps, due to her involvement with Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan. Some believed she was targeted due to her alleged love affairs or because she knew too many high-level secrets, particularly with her supposed connections to the Kennedys. The uncertainty about her cause of death all came together to give her final moments a ghostly, almost movie-like outlook, and just the sort of ending that would keep her name alive. Her death also spurred highway safety reforms. The grisly nature of the accident led to the installation of underride guards, also known as Mansfield bars, on the back of trailers to prevent such fatalities in the future. In this way, even in death, Jane Mansfield left an indelible mark on American culture and policy. Jane Mansfield's life was a mix of glamour, chaos, and fame. She loved fiercely, lived hard, and never backed away from the limelight. Her romances and marriages were torrid and messy, her parenting criticized, and her public image a matter of frequent controversy. Yet she claimed each moment and each rumor. Even during the worst times, Jane Mansfield did things her own way, paving the way for others to follow and redefining what it meant to be a woman. And that's it for the video. See you in the next one, and make sure to check out our other videos.